I have my thesis due in less than 2 months, 30th of September 2025 to be exact, and I haven't started. I have done my contents page, which I showed my supervisor a few days ago, and I have two manuscripts, one in internal review and one that I'm finishing off that should be published very soon, and my upgrade report. But apart from that, not started my thesis. I should be stressed. I'm pretty sure my peers are stressed for me, but I need to be held accountable, which is the reason why I'm doing this sort of video. I need to tell the world that I have not started and how my next 2 months are actually going to go. So this is going to be a sort of video diary of how I am doing my thesis, what my thesis is on, and any sort of ideas that I get throughout this. For example, one of the ideas that I do have is my thesis is going to be a book. Well, of course it's going to be a book. It's going to be like 200 pages. But I'm going to publish a book about my work. I'm going to publish a book about AI in healthcare. And I also need accountability for that. So let's go. In this sort of video, I want to just talk about my thesis outline and how to basically write a thesis. Everything I've learned in the last week or so in trying to figure out how to start, and I'll just continually keep updating this sort of series. So what's my thesis title? My thesis title is Machine Learning-Based Detection of Fetal Growth Restriction Using Ultrasound-Derived Aortic Diameter and Vascular Assessment. Complicated title for no reason, but that's just the way it is. It's the best way to summarize everything that I have done in my PhD in an unnecessarily complex way. I don't think this is done on purpose or any other PhD titles. It's just there's so much to talk about and it's hard to put that into one sentence. I do feel sorry for the person who has to read out all of the titles during graduation. Anyways, let's start off with what the outline should be. So of course you have your abstract, your context page, your acknowledgements, everything that you've done for a standard report. What you also need to have is a list of publications. So I'm going to have my two manuscripts, probably with her brackets of being submitted, and then any other abstracts or other works you've contributed to, any conferences, you just list this under publications. And then you go straight into your chapters. So chapter 1 would be the introduction. So you defined what you're working on. In my case, I'll be defining fetal growth restriction, how this is a complication during pregnancy, and about 40% of cases get diagnosed before birth, and how it's the leading cause of stillbirth. You talk about the challenges in diagnosis, what you're sort of working on. So mine would be, there's a new biomarker that could potentially diagnose fetal growth restriction faster. The role of ultrasound, computational model, machine learning, and then sum it up with your research aims and objectives. Now, one thing my supervisor did tell me to put into this section is a thesis outline. So a paragraph that basically says chapter 2 will talk about so-and-so, chapter 3 will talk about so-and-so. This is because when you submit this to your examiners, the people who are going to do your viva, they will have to write a report on basically what your work is. So if you have a little paragraph there which can summarize it up for them, you will be in their good books. And then you go on to the next chapter. So my next chapter would be literature review. This is really important. This basically talks about what exactly your project brings into the world of your specialty. So for me, I'm going to go into first the clinical background. So challenges in routine diagnosis, current diagnostic techniques, why is there 40% of cases diagnosed, what happens to the other 60% of cases. And then I'm going to go into the literature review of the biomarkers, which I introduced in my introduction, so diameter and aortic stiffness, why these are not used, how do they link to fetal growth restrictions, what studies could validate this theory for me, or validate this hypothesis that I'm testing, and then go into the methodology literature review. So I'll be using pulse width analysis. So has pulse width analysis been used in fetal studies? If not, then how often are they used in adult studies? any machine learning models which have been used in healthcare, so AI in healthcare for diagnosis, and then gaps in these literature. Which gap are you filling in terms of your research? Where does your research lie in the scale of novelty? The next couple chapters basically dive deep into what exactly I have done. So for me, it would be chapter 3, clinical data analysis. This is me talking about the data I have. So I've been given data from St. Thomas's Hospital, London, and this is the data they've given me. So 35 healthy, 25 growth restricted, and how have I extracted information from this data? How I've analyzed this information, and is there a difference between healthy fetuses and growth restriction fetuses with the data that I have been given? So what are my results of my initial hypothesis? Chapter 4 would be going into your methodology second phase after you've received your preliminary results. So this would be, for me, the generation of in silico dataset. I just talk about creating a virtual subject from literature data, from the clinical data, and doing a little bit of experiments with them. So I did a noise study, I did a co-founding factor study, and how this basically ties into my aim. How this basically ties into my aim and the results which I found from my previous chapter. So remember to just link each chapter to the aim and the previous chapter, so it's like a story. Then I have my next chapter,